Lascan Corda, I think we all need to recognise that recessions are a feature of all economies. It's unfortunately the case that that is so, but it is true. And I think we need to recognise that recessions occur when there is a decline in economic activity and when there is a significant reduction in spending. There were many recessions in the 20th century. I'm sure there were many recessions before the 20th century, but I suppose our ancestors at that time didn't have the means or mechanisms to evaluate and appraise economic activity. This country and the world went through a very significant recession between the years 2007 and 2009. Such was the severity and breadth of that recession that it's referred to in academic research as being the Great Recession. It had significant consequences upon the world and on this country. It just didn't have significant economic consequences on this country. It also had very significant social consequences on the country. Some of them were devastating upon the people who live here. I think since that recession between 2007 and 2009, there was a general expectation that we were going to meet another recession. Everyone assumed and everyone hoped that that next recession wouldn't be as severe as the Great Recession of 2007 and 2009, but there was a recognition that there would be one. I remember in 2016 there was a belief that because of turbulence in the Chinese markets that there was a recession coming. Then I recall in 2018 there was concern because of trade tensions between China and indeed the United States that another recession may be coming. Although we all knew that another recession was coming, I don't think anyone in this House, or indeed anyone in the world, thought that the recession was going to be caused by a global pandemic. But that is the case with what we have to face at present, Lascan Corla, and I think we need to recognise that this recession is highly unusual and highly exceptional when you look at the cause. Because it is a recession that is being caused by such an exceptional event, I think we need to recognise that this recession is different in a number of material respects. First of all, when you look at how recessions generally occur, there is generally a gradual decline in economic activity leading to the recession, or alternatively there's a sudden event and after that there's a gradual decline in economic activity. Neither of those examples happened in this recession. Instead, what we had was that we had an immediate and unpredictable dramatic decline in economic activity, and it occurred as a result of the outbreak of the pandemic, first in the Far East and then moving over into Europe. Then there is the second difference in terms of this recession, and it relates to how this recession, and we shouldn't be embarrassed to say this, was caused as a result of a deliberate act of government. Not just our own government, but of governments around the world. And as I've said previously, Lascan Corla, those deliberate acts in closing down our economy were merited at the time. They were justified. At the time, we saw what was happening in the intensive care units of Italy and Spain. We were legitimately concerned that people in Ireland would be subjected to the same circumstances in our own intensive care units. We would be left in the appalling position where people seeking intensive care couldn't be provided with it because our units were overrun. So we closed down our economy, and that was a deliberate act by us, and that distinguishes this recession from previous recession. The third way this recession is different from previous recessions is that in general, when you try to get out of a recession, the most important thing to do is to try to invigorate consumer confidence, to get people out spending again. You try to instill confidence into the population because, in general, what a recession does is it creates a sense of financial insecurity amongst the citizens of a country. People in this country feel a great sense of financial insecurity. That is true. But what is distinguishing this recession from previous recessions is that more than fear of financial insecurity, people are fearful for their health. That is why we need to recognise there are some parts of the recovery to this recession that are imponderable to us at this stage. For instance, when you look at businesses like restaurants or small cafes, to what extent are the recovery of those businesses going to be dependent upon individuals having the confidence to go back into restaurants, to go back into pubs? And that is something that we don't know the answer to as of yet, but we'll have to carefully appraise it. I think we should also be aware that a lot of the academic research on this pandemic, on the economic consequences of it, is very uncertain at present. If you look at any economic research, they'll try to give you 3 different or 4 different examples depending upon whether there is a severe outbreak of the disease in the future or whether it's just manageable as it is at present. So in fairness to economists and in fairness to everyone else, there's great uncertainty as to what the outcome will be. But we know that the OECD has stated that the level of output in economies will decline by somewhere between 1/5 and 1/4. If that happens, consumer spending is going to be down by 1/3. If that happens, and if that continues, we're going to find that this recession, I regret to say, is even going to be more devastating than the recession of 2007 to 2009. However, it's not all bad news. Anyone who's looked at, and I'm sure the Minister has looked at, the CSO figures from yesterday on retail spending, will know that retail spending in June was up on June last year. So that is a positive outlook on the horizon. But I think what it does reveal is that people are prepared to spend money in certain sectors, but we have to recognise there will be other sectors which involved, I suppose, the close amalgamation and congregation of people which are going to be very affected by it. I think that the response of the government to this pandemic has been very positive. I think, obviously, members of the opposition can be critical of the government response, but when you look at the response in general, I think it has been positive and I think it has been large. First and foremost, we've had the pandemic payment, which I think was very beneficial to people who lost their jobs immediately, and I welcome the fact that we're not eradicating that and that there's a recognition that that payment has to stay. Secondly, when you look at the wage subsidy scheme, that has provided huge support to businesses, and we need to continue with that scheme. Third, there's lots of grants that are available for businesses to restart, and I welcome the fact that commercial rates are going to be waived and individuals are going to be given the recognition of that. We need to recognise that we need to provide even further supports for business into the future, and I think the objective of the state should be to cushion the blow on businesses of this extraordinary recession and of this extraordinary economic event. In short, I think what the state can do is we can provide to businesses a parachute to help their decline, to help them to ensure that there is safety there, that they can land safely when this pandemic passes through and finishes, as presumably it will. If we didn't do that, and if we followed what happened around the world in the 2007-2009 recession, we'd find ourselves in a very appalling situation. The way that that recession was dealt with is we decided that debts had to be dealt with immediately, and we decided around the world as well that the state wouldn't intervene in order to try to help people to get over very turbulent waters. If we tried that now, what would have happened is that all the businesses in the centre of the city and around the country would have gone to the wall in March and April. They wouldn't have survived. So the state can commend itself for the fact that measures were put in place to ensure that those businesses did survive. They've survived to date. They will survive, hopefully, into the future. And what we need to ensure is that we provide safe passage for those businesses from now through the pandemic and on to the other side, where we will have, hopefully, a much safer economy. I think it is important to state, however, that we should not allow this pandemic to control and dominate our lives. It is a disease. That's what it is. Every generation produces diseases. It is a very dangerous disease to vulnerable people and to elderly people, and it seems to affect different people in different ways. But we need to recognise that we can't allow it to control our lives. The best economic development that has occurred in recent times is the fact that we have announced that our children will be going back to school fully in the end of August. That's an enormous enhancement to our economy, as well as being absolutely essential for our children's development. I think we also need to recognise that, what Deputy McNamara stated previously, there was a lot of sense in it. We're sending out the wrong message by being stuck in this enormous mausoleum. We need to get out of here. We need to get back to Leinster House and Dáil Éireann, where we can work together as we can readily, and we shouldn't be giving the impression to the public at large looking in that politicians are in some way a special species that deserve special protection. Cahir, I don't know if Deputy Brown has arrived. If he has, I'll stop now. If he's not coming,
I don't see him, Deputy.
Okay, well in that case I'll continue with it if it's okay with you.
Please do.
Cahir, I just wanted to conclude by making this following point. The state has made a huge investment in our businesses, and it's the correct thing to do. The reason we've made this big investment in businesses is because we see the societal benefit of businesses and the employment they provide, and that the fact there is much more to economy than the generation of profits. Now, at some stage after this, those businesses will be able to walk fully on their own. But I do think they need to recognise that they also have a societal responsibility, as well as the state having a societal responsibility. For too long, businesses, or very many businesses, have seen their exclusive role as being the generation of profits for shareholders. What happens is that the people managing the businesses try to maximise profits for shareholders. They do that very effectively, and as a result, they receive large rewards for that. Businesses need to recognise that they have greater societal responsibilities than simply maximising profits for their own shareholders. They need to recognise that they have a responsibility to the economy and to society in the same way as the state recognises its responsibilities. I don't think that role is fulfilled by businesses simply assuming and presenting that they have corporate responsibility duties and they give out small amounts of monies to charities and local projects. They need to recognise that they need to get away from their devotion to the accumulation of profits for shareholders. Now, that's not a Marxist sentiment. That is simply a sentiment recognising the greater responsibility that businesses have above and beyond their own generation of profits. So, Cahir, I'm going to conclude now at that point. I want to say in respect of the legislation that we're discussing here that it is very beneficial. It's a continuation of the proposals that were put in place initially. I welcome the fact that Section 2, we're going to replace the temporary wage subsidy scheme with the employment wage subsidy scheme. It's a very good scheme and we need to keep it going. Sections 3, 4 and 5 deal with debt warehousing measures, which were announced by the Revenue Commissioners back in March. I welcome then the revenue need to adopt a more conciliatory approach to people in business and indeed outside business who have found it very difficult to make revenue payments on foot of the fact that the pandemic has occurred and the economy has collapsed. Section 6 obviously amends the Taxes Consolidation Act, and it reduces the interest rate that the revenue can charge of 3%, that will apply. And then there's the stay and spend tax credit, which I think will be beneficial. I know people have said, well, why don't we bring that in immediately so that people can go off on holidays in August and avail of it then? Most people in this House are going off on holidays, and most people in Ireland are spending holidays in Ireland. And I think we're going to have a good August and bit of September in the holiday season here. I think it's a good idea to hold off on this scheme until October. I also welcome the fact that the Help to Buy scheme is up by €10,000 to €30,000. And finally, Section 9 of the bill deals with the Cycle to Work scheme. One thing that we have learned, and one thing that has been beneficial during the course of this lockdown, is that lots of people should be cycling around this city. It is probably one of the best cities in Europe for cycling. It's flat, you can move quickly around it, and there are improvements in the cycling infrastructure. I hope that those improvements will continue when we get a better cycling infrastructure, but more people should be cycling. I'm pleased to note that bicycle shops are sold out of bicycles. We need to start encouraging more people in the cities to use bicycles, as it's the most efficient way of getting around. Thanks very much, Cahir.
Thank you, Deputy.